To thank you all so much for coming to join us today here at Atlanta Tech Village. I am Trevor Williams with Global Atlanta. Good to see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces. It's always a pleasure to reinforce relationships and build new ones. And so that's really what today is all about. If you're wondering about the title, yes, I'm obsessed with alliteration. I always add way too many alliterative phrases to titles. But if you look at what we're trying to do today, it's kind of summed up in that expat expectations. So what should be our expectations for the day? We're really trying to showcase all the different various topics that you're going to have to deal with if you're handling talent across borders, inbound and outbound. We know that we have not covered everything. This event today is really designed to be a little bit of a laboratory where we see what works and hopefully build towards another event in the future. We hope to do this annually, and we know we're sort of missing some pieces, but we didn't want to keep you for 4 or 5 hours. So we wanted to make sure that this is a digestible luncheon format and get you back out doing the things that you do. So yeah, why do we do this? We're Global Atlanta. We're an international business news website. So we try to showcase how Atlanta is connected to the rest of the world, and really the newer kind of aspect of what we're doing is really trying to help people navigate the intricacies and the complexities of the global economy. So that's been our kind of guiding point for a lot of the events that we do and the way that we convene people. A lot of you may have come to our Consular Conversations series that we host every month. And really it's all about building relationships, helping people get together and help each other. So that's really what that's why we brought together a lot of our partners who have expertise in these certain topics today. So that's who you're going to hear from. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started because I know that we have limited time, and I'm not going to do flowery introductions, but I will tell you the basics of who you're going to listen to. And I'm going to tell you right now the format. We're going to do 2 successive remarks or presentations. Then we're going to have a quick time where I'll sit down with an entrepreneur or an expat in the flesh, and we'll just talk through some of the things that they've been going through settling here in Atlanta. So you have kind of a personal perspective as well as the expertise. So without further ado, we're going to start with Charles Kuck from Kuck, Baxter Immigration. And I'm not sure if we can fit all of Chuck's expertise into 10 minutes, but we'll try. So thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it.
Hey everybody, how are you? I wasn't really quite sure of the format, but I did get these questions from Trevor, so I'm going to pull my questions out. I don't know if you know this, but immigration is a little controversial. Let's start with the least controversial issue, all right? Our current immigration system is broken. It's completely broken. I did a podcast this morning on a blog that I wrote yesterday about the delays, how long it actually takes to get a green card through employment. So if you have a bachelor's degree and you are not from India, it's probably going to take you right now about 7 years to get a green card. It's about how long that's going to take. That's the new waiting line because of the number of people in line, limited number of visas. But if you're from India, it's 197 years because our system's broken. The last time that we actually looked at our immigration, our Congress who does this, all right, the last time Congress actually considered substantive changes to employment-based immigration was 1990. Did you have a cell phone in 1990? I had an IBM dual disk drive computer where you put the WordPerfect disk in one side and the other disk in the other. That was the technology of the time. We were mostly a manufacturing-based economy, completely different today. And yet Congress has done nothing since 1990, 33 years with doing nothing. Here's the bad news, and that's the good news. The good news is they're not going to do anything. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to pass this Congress or the next Congress. I mean, I suggest that perhaps the next time we'll see any substantive possibility of real change to our system to make it actually responsive to our economy, to responsive to employers, probably be 2026, probably. Mostly it's because businesses aren't complaining loud enough about the problem. Trevor had a couple things he wanted me to talk about today. How did the pandemic affect immigration? It was a nightmare. But here's what's weird. So the consulates around the world, many of you work with consulates, have clients abroad, basically every consulate in the world was closed for 18 months. It's closed. Somebody asked me earlier about E2 visas, investor visas from Colombia. Colombians can, that have money can come here and invest in the United States. They can get an investor visa. Except the U.S. consulate in Bogota has not issued an E2 visa since March of 2020. They just haven't. They're behind. That's their excuse. And so we had this massive backlog that's built over there. The Immigration Service in the United States, however, remained open, at least remotely. They remained open. So they continued to process cases. So they processed cases that needed consular work, and consulates are now, in many countries of the world, 2 years behind. Any of you that have friends or colleagues or employees that need to get a visitor visa? For example, in Mexico, the next available visitor visa appointment in Mexico City is 537 days from today. So a year and a half from now, that's when you can apply for your visitor visa. System's broken. It's completely broken. Not that I'm talking down my job, but the reality is system's broken. Did I mention that? Right now, over the course of the last year, I have probably met with 50 employers, whether they be large corporations, or just small businesses, restaurants, landscapers. Hey, I need a body. I need people. What visa do I get for them? There is no visa for that. There's no, if you don't have a bachelor's degree, there is no visa. You don't get to bring in somebody on a temporary work visa who doesn't have a bachelor's degree. It just doesn't exist. You can bring in people if you as an employer can show that you have a temporary need. But what restaurant has a temporary need that's not called Mar-a-Lago? I mean, there's really very few of them that don't, or a construction company. When I did work out of Arizona, one of our clients was a Utah-based company, it's a landscaping company. Now, if you do landscaping in Utah, that's not a year-round job. I mean, that's basically 6 months a year. Same company in Georgia, it's a year-round job. So the company in Utah could get temporary workers, but not the company in Georgia. That's our system. That's how our current system works. We have these artificial caps on visas. This last year, many of you are aware of what an H-1B visa is. H-1Bs are people that have bachelor's degrees from a U.S. school or from a school abroad, at least a bachelor's degree. And every year, our Congress has said that 65,000 new H-1Bs can be issued to bachelor's degree holders or master's degrees, and an additional 20,000 to U.S. master's degree graduates. It's 85,000 H-1Bs every year. Government year is October 1. The law says you can apply 6 months beforehand, so you can begin applying for your H-1B on April 1st. Well, beginning in about 2013, as the economy recovered from the recession, there was a huge demand for people in these jobs. That, I want the best and the brightest. There's about 1 million foreign students in the U.S. today, graduating with U.S. degrees. Yes, we'd like them to stay, but only 85,000 of them a year can apply for this program. 3 years ago, in a lottery that immigration started, they had about 230,000 applicants. 3 years ago, they had about 320,000 applicants. 2 years ago, in 2022, they had about 480,000 applicants. And this year, they had about 725,000 applicants for those same 85,000 jobs. This system's broken. It's just not there. And so that's why getting the legal skills, getting this stuff done the right way is essential, because if you miss the boat's not coming back for you. One of the things that Trevor wanted me to talk, and you tell me when I'm close to done, all right? 'Cause I could talk all freaking day on immigration, is Ukrainians. One of the good things that came out of the Ukrainian war is that it caused the Biden administration to adopt a new way of thinking on bringing people. The president cannot make immigration laws, but the president has had authority since 1952 for parole. Parole is kind of the secret weapon of the immigration program, but very few presidents have really ever used it effectively. The Biden administration, really the first, that created a parole program for Ukrainians. So if you're Ukrainian or you were in Ukraine when the war started, you could be paroled and be privately sponsored by U.S. citizens. Privately sponsored. This is the coolest thing in the world. Americans can now sponsor immigrants that they're not related to. And it's not a sponsorship that comes with any real obligation other than, yes, I'm going to make sure they have a place to stay. I'm going to make sure. And this parole program came with work permits. Very cool program. Now, the thing about the program, though, is because it was created first by Biden, and then Congress stepped in and said, hey, we want to make sure this is done right, so we're going to allocate a certain number of paroles for this, and we're going to treat these Ukrainians as if they were refugees, because that's really what they are, right? So, great, the program starts, it gets going, and then people get here, and they apply for a work permit, and immigration says, oh, by the way, you want a work permit, it's $540. That's what it costs to get a work permit. And people just paid it. And a friend of mine, when I were talking about 8 months ago, said, don't refugees get free work permits? I think I had that in the back of my mind. We went and looked at the law. Yeah. And then we looked at the law that Congress created and said, treat them as refugees. So we sued the Immigration Service for $80 million. Immigration, about a week before their answer was due in federal court, issued a new policy that said, oh, Ukrainians get free work permits. But they haven't refunded the money yet. So that's happening. But when the Biden administration took the parole program for Ukrainians and expanded it. And you all know the crisis at the border, the breathless reporters at the fence. Oh my God, we're all going to die. They're coming across the border. Look at all this, people seeking asylum. And Biden said, you know what, let's create a couple programs. If you're Venezuelan, if you're Cuban, if you're Nicaraguan, or you're Haitian, you could be sponsored like the Ukrainians were. And what happened? The number of Ukrainians, Haitians, Cubans, and Nicaraguans fell through the floor at the border. And now they've announced, hey, we're going to have these special centers starting in Costa Rica, and then it'll be in Colombia, and then they'll be in other parts of the world, where you can apply to come through parole programs. It's a brilliant use of the parole program by the administration. Plus, when they come in, they apply for a work permit. This is great for U.S. employers, because now you have this new flow of workers that are coming to the United States that are being cared for by their families that can work then to support themselves. It's a brilliant use of the program. I would say call your congressman, but we actually have pretty good congressmen in Georgia these days. We certainly have good senators on immigration. The reality is the way the leadership is set up in the House and the Senate, it's not set up to pass a bill like this on its own. In fact, the last time Congress passed an immigration bill was in 2001. I mean, an immigration bill by itself was in 2001. It's been over 20 years. And that's because immigration is such a fraught topic. It's such a political topic. There's so much emotion that comes along with that it just by itself, you can't get 60 senators, because you need 60, you don't need 50. So even though Democrats have a majority, they can't pass anything. And in the House, if you have a Republican Party that is using immigration as clickbait to support them and being anti-immigrant, they're not going to pass anything that is good for immigrants. So right now, it's just not set up to do that. But I would suggest keep calling, be in touch with your representatives. When you can't find employees, you should call your senator. I can't find employees. What are you doing about immigration? The reality is we all know about demographics, right? We aren't birthing enough babies in America. I mean, basically the whole world almost, other than Africa, is not birthing enough babies. So without immigration, when the census came out in 2020, the results came out in 2021, interesting thing happened. America grew, but it grew by the number of immigrants that it immigrated over the previous 10 years. It did not grow by us. And we all know what happens to a country which doesn't grow population-wise. It's called Japan. It's called Italy. That's what happens. And they get in an economic malaise because you're not bringing the people of your country who want to come. Lazy people don't walk across the desert. I mean, smart people want to come to America because they see opportunity here, and our current system is set up to basically not let them in. That's the way it is. Trevor? On that depressing note, I'll turn it back to Trevor.
I was going to say, such an uplifting end to that conversation. But I do want to say we'll have hopefully some time for Q&A at the end. I hope y'all will kind of gather your questions, and I'm going to hopefully bring everybody back up. So thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it. Now we're going to bring up Paula Henao from Atlanta Fine Homes, Sotheby's. I'm going to sit with Paula, and we're going to have a little conversation here, and we'll go from there. I'm going to switch microphones.
Hello.
Yeah, there you go. All right, perfect. Perfect.
Thank you, Trevor. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and I sent everybody way too many questions, as you saw with Chuck. So hopefully we can.
We have more than 10 minutes of information, right?
We set a bad precedent, I guess. No, well, just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to Atlanta and Georgia, and your personal history, and then we'll kind of get into the meat of the.
So I came
remarks.
to Atlanta 20 years ago in 2003. I was brought by a local builder. And basically, I have an architecture background. I came to work for the builder for the same reasons that Charles was explaining.
Yeah.
He was looking for talent, and he couldn't find enough people for his company at that time. He was also looking to to expand his business into the Atlanta area. He was building in Augusta, Georgia, and we had about a production of probably like 500 homes per year. And it's interesting because, and I think we're gonna talk a little bit about those cultural challenges, because when he hired me, he kept saying that the job was in Atlanta, when actually the job was in Augusta, Georgia. So coming from Bogota, which is a very multicultural city, it was a big cultural.
Well, I don't know this about you. So, what kind of drove you to come to the U.S.? I mean, like, was it the job itself, or was it the opportunity? I'm kind of picking up on what Chuck was saying. We benefit from all the smart people that get to come here.
Actually, it happened that I graduated about in the end of 1990s. I don't remember, it's already blurry. But I took a break in my profession and went to London for a year. And when I went back to Bogota, started looking for a job as an architect again. And I came across this job. And I thought it was a great opportunity. I was single at the time. Colombia was experiencing a moment of economic downturn. And there were not many projects being built in the city. And it was an opportunity for me. I thought at that moment that I will be here for maybe 3 years, and maybe I go work for 3 years, go back to Bogota. But as soon as I was able to make the transition from Augusta to Atlanta, I fell in love with Atlanta. Atlanta has always been fascinating to me. And I met my husband here. Now my kids were born here, and this is home for us.
Yeah. That's great. Well, now that you actually are in Atlanta, tell us a bit about what's happening in the market here. I mean, obviously, real estate's super local, right? So it depends on which market you're talking about within the market of Atlanta. But
right.
Are the interest rate rises dampening demand? Like, just give us a bit of a sense for what's going on. And I know Michael has your slides up, so if you want to showcase anything, you can.
I'm glad that you said real estate is local. That's always very important to keep in mind, because most of the time we watch the national news and they are very negative. They are always talking about, an overall idea of what the market is doing, and it's very different in Atlanta. In the graph that you see in the screen, basically we have, I know it's a little bit small, but it starts in about beginning of COVID, March 2020, and it goes all the way to today, basically. So that you can see with the light green is basically number of units for sale and how they went up in 2020, and then they slowly start coming down, where there was almost no inventory available during the COVID years, which is the middle hump. Yeah. And then you see when the light green starts growing up again is basically when we saw the changes a year ago with interest rates. And basically interest rates have changed in an upward trend for about 10 times in the last year. They are probably in the mid-sixes right now. This week was a very interesting week because we had yesterday the reading for the CPI, Consumer Price Index, which basically showed that inflation is moderating. However, it didn't affect in a positive way the interest rates. And we're expecting the Fed today to pronounce and see what is going to happen with interest rates. In a nutshell, basically, we see more homes for sale. We see longer days on the market for a property from the time that it becomes active to the time that it goes under contract. But we're still seeing enough activity in Atlanta to keep the market going. And the activity is mainly drawn by, relocations, expansion. Everybody's coming to Atlanta. An important factor is the multiple offers situation continues to play a big role, and it's mainly because for the absence of enough supply.
Well, you've carved out a niche for yourself, kind of working with a lot of people that come in from other parts of the world. I remember talking to you about sitting around a closing table and having everybody from, I think it was from Latin America, just some from Brazil, some from Colombia, some from Mexico or Cuba or whatever. Tell us a bit about how that's progressing. I mean, how have you built that niche for yourself, and what does that look like? What are the expectations and needs of buyers who are coming in from other parts of the world? What does that look like versus someone locally that's just relocating?
So I like to start by saying that I did an analysis of my business and, my values and who's the people that I enjoy working with. And I realized that I have obviously an affinity with international people because I can share with them my story and my experiences. And so I always enjoy working with professionals and families that are relocating to the city, and often I see that mix at the closing table where we have a lender from Latin America, and maybe the family on the buyer side is from another country, and it's an interesting mix, and it has helped me also learn about the differences in culture and the challenges that different countries have when purchasing or selling real estate.
Where are they looking in Atlanta, or where are people? Where are some of the hotter areas, I guess?
Well, Atlanta, as we can see in the screen, the Atlanta ecosystem, we have a big variety of areas. And it also depends. I mean, everybody lives everywhere. There are not necessarily some demographic pockets, but most of the relocations or the criteria that I see we take into consideration is commute, where some of the industry pockets are, and then what are some of the hardest areas in the city. So as far as industry pockets, I see a lot of like 2 or 3 pockets for the healthcare industry, one being Johns Creek. Johns Creek's goal is to position as the #1 city for healthcare. And Emory Hospital in Johns Creek is at the head of that initiative. There are a lot of medical practices in the area, and now the city is going to redevelop their downtown, where the site for State Farm used to be. And since they left that site to go to Sandy Springs, they are going to do a development where Boston Scientific is coming to Johns Creek, so that's one. The other healthcare pocket is obviously near Emory in Decatur, Druid Hills with this massive project that is getting built. Then we have the fintech industry basically in the Alpharetta, Johns Creek area, Forsyth County, and North Fulton. Those are the main pockets. For film production, we have Fayette County and Doraville are probably the most important ones. And then we have Rivian on the electrical cars, building this huge plant. I understand it's one of the largest economic projects in the state, and it's going to bring 75,000 jobs to the area, and they are located in the area of Social Circle, southeast of I-20.
Yeah, it really feels like the entire metro area is booming in certain ways.
It's amazing.
But, part of your purpose, I think, has been to help people obviously build wealth through their home or through other investments. What does that look like for companies that are coming, or people that are investing in Metro Atlanta for an income type property? Do you see a lot of demand for that from Latin America, Brazil, Colombia, et cetera? And then how does that affect people locally, right? Because I think housing affordability is one question everybody's always talking about.
Right. So a couple of things that I would like to say regarding that topic. Number one is, again, we have to keep in mind that Atlanta is the most wonderful opportunity in real estate at this time because of its growth. We are the number 4th metro area in growth in the nation. And what that means is that we have people coming from everywhere, and that will continue. The projection is that we will grow to 8.6 million in 2050. So what that means is we need more properties, we need more homes, we need to find a place for all these new families. So that's one part of the question. That in itself is the reason why investing in real estate is important in Atlanta. Then we have an influx of international investors. Latin America is a big player in that area. Why? Because Latin America is experiencing a lot of political issues and economic issues, and most of the region is on the left side now, and that is not necessarily perceived as positive for a lot of the population, and they are looking for opportunities to invest here. And most of the time, Latin Americans, they only know about the Florida market, right. So they are starting to understand that the Georgia market is also very attractive, and offers a lot of opportunities.
Well, I think we're getting close to time, but tell us about your relocation guide. I know you're working on that before you joined Atlanta Fine Homes, Sotheby's, but I think they have one as well. And what does Atlanta need to do to keep welcoming these people, I guess?
So Atlanta needs to work on a program where we have a more cohesive process. Because what happens right now is that in our case, for example, with realtors, we are usually the number 1 point of contact for families or professionals when they arrive in the city. And we provide a lot of information as far as education resources, as far as how the city is built and what are the different pockets in the city. And after doing an assessment with the family or the expat, we can identify what is the area that suits best for them. And that's why having a relocation guide was very important for me before, and now that I have joined Atlanta Fine Homes, and the company had already built a wonderful relocation page. You can scan the QR code.
At the table and on the screens, right?
And exactly, and have access to the guide. It showcases all the different areas and cities in Atlanta, in the metro area. And it also has links to school information, recreation information, cultural information. So it's an amazing tool.
All right, great. We'll pick it up. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
We really
Trevor.
appreciate it. Paula? I'm going to ask Carlos Delcid from Puzzle to come up, and we'll talk to our real-life expat here. Please. Thank you. Yeah. So,
Hi, everyone.
welcome, welcome. Thanks for having us at your home here.
Oh, thank you.
So, Puzzle's here in Atlanta Tech Village.
Yeah, proud to be part of ATV, for sure.
Quick commute for Carlos this morning. So tell us a bit about Puzzle. Just give us like a brief overview of what y'all do.
So Puzzle is a staffing firm that is focused on providing access to Latin America workforce for the Atlanta ecosystem. So pretty much our strongest focus right now is hiring software developers in multiple countries across Latin America that they can get to work remotely with the startup ecosystem across the United States, but most specifically in the Atlanta area, where it's given the fact that we're part of ATV, it has grown a lot,
Yeah, yeah.
for sure.
Well, you're from Honduras.
Honduras, yeah.
Yes, awesome. So tell us about how you ended up in Atlanta.
Uh,
You didn't go to Augusta first, right?
no, definitely
Okay,
not.
good, good.
I came straight to ATL.
We love Augusta too, but
Yeah.
it's not Atlanta.
Funny enough, everything started with a Google search back in 2020 through the pandemic. Me and my best friend, now co-founder and partner in crime, we were exploring what were the best opportunities across United States to actually open the business here, given that my background has been in recruiting. I've been really familiar, not just with Honduras, but the entire Latin America region. I was really familiarized with the potential and outstanding talent that you can find there. And we were looking, again, to a headquarters city that we could use as a starting point to promote that talent in the United States. And again, it really started with a Google search. It started with finding about the Atlanta Tech Village. I think one of the reasons we were able to move our business or start our business here and grow it from being just me and my co-founder to 50 plus employees nowadays and being profitable 7 figures business. It's because of all the learning that we have got from the Tech Village, their advisors team, and all the support that we have received from the ecosystem. Another big part was the airport. Yeah. You all know the airport is great here. It's a 2 hours and 45 minutes flight to Honduras. So I usually tell my clients, it takes you longer to go to Vegas from here than it will take you to go to Honduras. Yeah. And that's just the close access, time zone difference is just 2 hours. And then Atlanta is one of those, it's in the top 5 growing cities in the tech ecosystem, especially. So all those components made part of the decision of coming to Atlanta. Yeah. No regret so far, by the way. I love the city.
I was gonna say, like, it sounds pretty rosy. Did the Google search matched up with your expectations and everything? I mean, do you have any challenges in setting up your life here in general?
Well, I will say the challenge has come not from the community, because the community has been great. Atlanta, before living here, because I recently moved to Atlanta 4 months ago, but before that, I used to be traveling a lot back and forth, and I realized it was a really diverse and welcoming city. The entire tech ecosystem, the entire startup ecosystem in here, it's huge and it is really unified. The challenges mostly has been from the system itself. Yeah. It's not built in a way to welcome expats. Your credit score, finding a house, and we were talking with Paula and Carlos a second ago about how challenging it is to actually get yourself a credit, finding yourself with a lot of paperwork, from getting your driver license, your social security. And after that, there's this next layer of things that I didn't expect it, which is proving that you're not a fraud every time that you submit an application, because they see this new social security running around, and I don't know, it really is a lot more paperwork than I would have expected. But aside from that, everything has been outstanding. It's been great.
Is there one or two things you wish you would have known before that Google didn't show you? I mean, about Atlanta?
The traffic, for sure. The traffic, for sure. I mean, if I would have known traffic was that bad, because when I was traveling earlier, like 2 years ago here, we were in the middle of a pandemic, so I got a little sidetracked. And I was like, whoa, live near the airport. It's a 20 minutes drive to Buckhead. That's not true nowadays. Now it's an hour and 20 minutes drive, so it's kind of a little challenge. But aside from that, I think everything else have been just really smooth and just has flown the right way. So
perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Good. One more of those coming a little bit later, but we're going to move on to someone else who can tell you some things you need to know before you get somewhere, which is how to set up your family situation. And this is Michael Maneely, the founder of the Maneely Firm, international family law attorney. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it. Good. Is it still morning? No, good afternoon. That's right, it became afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. So we practice practice international family law. We have 6 offices around the state, one of them in Atlanta, Marietta, other places around the state. And we're about to open our first international office in London. I'll be there this summer getting that going. What we do, and we've had this discussion a number of times this morning, you think about family law, it's divorce, right? It's custody, it's that sort of thing. What we do is international on that scale, right? So we're handling international divorces. The center of that is child abduction, and I'm sure everybody here has heard of the Hague Convention, right? Actually, there are just dozens of Hague Conventions, but in family law, the Hague Convention we're talking about is a Hague Convention on child abduction. And that has to do with when children are taken from where they live to somewhere else. And the issue there in family law is it doesn't matter whether you're from Alabama or Azerbaijan. The interest is the same when people are parting, when couples are parting, and that's, I want to go home. I want to go home. Who here is from somewhere else? Okay. All right, so it truly doesn't matter. If you had a couple that the guy was from here and the gal was from Birmingham, when they separate, the feeling is the same. I want to go home. But you change that from Birmingham, Alabama to Birmingham, England, we change things a lot, right? In terms of the practicalities, the process, the risk. It's a whole lot harder to get over to Birmingham, England and get involved in access to your child than it is in Birmingham, Alabama. The judiciary is different, although they both are common law based. You start changing that up to somewhere else where most of the countries are, which is civil law based, and you change things even more. So child abduction, we also handle international property issues and that sort of thing. But child abduction, the normal child abduction, and you can just cycle through the slides if you want to. The normal child abduction that we see most often is parents are separating and they're taking their child back to wherever they were at from the metro area or maybe from where they are to here. Let's talk about somebody getting relocated to Beijing, right? And the couple separates and one of them wants to come back home to Atlanta, so we're dealing cross borders. In terms of expats in particular, what I want to think about is, and these are some cities where we have worked before on this particular issue, where an HR department has gone to incredible lengths to identify the right person for the job, for this corporation in another place. And again, remember, it might be abroad coming here. And they've identified now the vice president of sales, let's say, for example, and they vetted that person, they brought them here, or they've sent them to Istanbul. Actually, in that case, I think that was something in manufacturing. And they brought them here, and they've relocated their family here, and they've created a new life for them, and thankfully they've talked to Paula, and they understand, right, where they're living, and it's a wonderful place, and everything's going swimmingly, except they brought here, or they brought there, all the problems that they had there or here. And that might have involved a little bit of familial conflict. And at some point down the road, whether that is a month from now, or a year from now, or 5 years from now, they go their separate ways, and I want to go home feeling strikes. And suddenly the children wind up in the different place than where they had been for that length of time. So from the HR perspective, what we want folks to think about in HR is what kind of documentation, what kind of contract, what kind of markers are you laying down, and broader than, if we're out of a corporate perspective, what kind of markers are you laying down in terms of your relocation? And that's how the convention, and that's how truly the judiciary branch in every country is going to identify this, right? What kind of markers are you laying down to say, this is a temporary thing? I'm going to Atlanta from Hong Kong because I want to try it out. Versus I'm going to Atlanta from Stockholm. That was a great case. That was in Stockholm. I'm going from Atlanta to Stockholm because I want to live in Atlanta. I want to raise my family in Atlanta, right? Two very different sides of the spectrum. Where you fall in that spectrum determines how the judiciary is going to interpret where your child not should live, but let me be more precise, what court should determine where your child should live, right? This is a jurisdictional question. This is not a federal court, in the United States, a federal court that tends to make this decision, deciding who gets custody of your children. It's deciding which court will decide who determines custody of the children, right? So in the Stockholm case, the mother had contended it was a temporary relocation to Stockholm, where she was from. She contended she had lost her student visa. It was very temporary. She actually sandbagged the dad, slept with him for a long time, said, we're still a couple, just have to come to Stockholm to do it, until a requisite year period had passed. And then the cat was out of the bag. Bye-bye, didn't like you anyway. I'm keeping our daughter here, right? And so the Stockholm court, through the work that we did in the United States and gathering the evidence, and the trial that we did in Stockholm, was able to determine that that was a temporary relocation from the couple's perspective, and send the child back to Cherokee County, where we tried that case, and the child is now about to graduate high school here. Does that make sense? So that's the kind of case that we work on. So in your own lives and in your friends' lives, as you're thinking about the markers that you lay down, those will be the bits of evidence, the forensic evidence, that the attorneys will work through in determining where y'all, you and the other parent, had the perspective of where you wanted this child raised and how to determine that. The other element that we're going to be working on extensively, I suspect, and we're already seeing it, has to do with the existential crises that are taking place. You have the existential crisis fundamentally, which is the parents breaking apart, right? Through whatever issue was going on there. Maybe it was financial, maybe it was infidelity. We were talking earlier about a case out of, I think it was Antwerp, where the couple had a fight about which weather they preferred. Dad preferred the Georgia weather. They were both from Antwerp. Preferred the Georgia weather where it was hot and sticky and sunny and all this kind of stuff. And she really preferred the dismal climate of Antwerp. That was her own perspective. But she wanted, and that was their issue. So there's that fundamental issue between the parties. But then there's also the other kinds of existential issues that people face. We were talking about Ukraine earlier. Somewhere back in there. I don't see it offhand, Charles. There we go, back over there. Ukraine. We saw a tremendous amount of work we needed to do when the war was breaking out in rescuing children and bringing them here. Interestingly now, we're seeing a good bit of work in helping children get back, right? Because one of the parents has decided that with the counteroffensive starting to take place, it may be time to look at going back to Ukraine. And so we're going to have the issue of these folks that have been here for a couple of years now. What happens if one of them goes, I really like it in America, right? And the other one says, I want to get back to Kyiv. This is where we belong. And the other existential crises that we're going to witness. You're talking about tremendous growth in Atlanta, which is going to take place through 2050. Part of the reason why I think that's going to continue, if you guys are following what the work is being done on global warming, is that the Southeast is going to be one of the best places to live from an environmental standpoint, probably through the end of the century, perhaps, right? And so when you're looking at existential crises, such as the loss of islands in the South Pacific, such as other sort of, California, places that are having a tougher and tougher and tougher time in their population surviving there, we're going to become all the more attractive. A long time ago, I had a fellow say, what does it matter if the Atlantic Ocean comes all the way up to Macon? At least I own property in Cobb County. Well, great, we got a lot of people moving into Metro Atlanta, right? And so when you think about the other existential crises that impact families, I think what we can anticipate is that there's going to be a whole lot more stresses on the families that cause that fundamental question from an expat community perspective of, I want to go home. And that's where we come in. And that's something for all y'all to think about, and thank you for listening to me. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you so much, Michael. We're on schedule, y'all. What's up with that? I am going to bring up now Marsha Maxwell, who's the Director of Innovation for the Atlanta International School. Marsha, are we doing conversation? You're going to just, okay, cool. Great. Switching mics again. Well, tell us about Atlanta International School. We're not too far from you here.
Yeah, we're just
Turn that on, sorry. Switch.
I would have trouble with technology, being the head of technology. Yeah, so we're just down the street, maybe 5-minute drive from here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to see all the visitors to the Beckhead area. Yeah.
Well, tell us a bit about AIS's approach to education. I mean, I'm not sure everybody's familiar with it. Obviously, private school, but populated with many different expats, but also, I think, half local students.
Yeah, about half of our students have a U.S. passport, and half of our students have international passports. And I think the bulk of the people in the building have some connection internationally. I myself, I'm American-born, but I'm a first-generation American, and I've lived in about 10 different countries. So we have many, many stories like that at AIS, and we're all bringing our international flair, however that flair may be, into how we educate students.
Yeah. But just from a specific practical perspective, what kind of education are you getting if you go to AIS?
Yes, so we have a very immersive environment. We're really known for our language program. And from the age of 3 to 12, you're in a immersive language program. So basically from 3 to 5, all you're hearing at school is either Spanish, French, German, or Chinese all day, every day. We have students from, say, 3K to 5K are doing this all day, every day. From first grade to fifth grade, then you have A day, B day. So we're making sure that they're getting this international, this foreign language is becoming a part of who they are, and not just the language, but also the culture. So you're in class with students who are from many different countries. Some of them are native speakers, some of them are language learners like yourself. And we're really trying to foster this really intercultural development of a student, not just learning a language. Most of us took a language in high school, but really diving into the culture and getting to know how this culture thinks, how they behave, why they do the things that they do, and what's important to them as people. So we have a truly global perspective.
I know that y'all have the IB, International Baccalaureate Program, so it's portable, right?
Yeah, so
Because you have a lot of people moving around the world.
yes, so we have a highly mobile community as well. And so one great thing about the IB program is that if you're taking an IB class in France and say you're relocated to America for a year or 2 years, 3 years, your students are coming into a program that they're familiar with. They're coming into a system that they're familiar with. And should you go back to France, the kids don't miss a beat. They go right back into the right grades. They're not worried about, basically losing out on the curriculum. They slip right in. So it's been a really big help for many families who are coming to America, whether they're coming from wherever in the world. They can slot their kids into a program where not only are they getting a similar education, but also they're getting an experience of being around people who are also like themselves. Because many of us have been, expats, we've been different places, and it's always you're the odd man out, you're trying to fit in. But these kids are around other children who know exactly what they're feeling, and they can help each other, and they slip right in to become community really quickly.
Well, I didn't prepare you for this, but I'm curious, in that same vein, if you'll talk about the heritage language program,
Yes.
just because I think that's something innovative that y'all have done that I haven't seen anywhere else. And I think it fits in exactly what you're saying of helping people retain their sense of connection to home and all that.
Yeah, so basically, I'll give myself for an example. I'm Jamaican, so we speak Jamaican Creole. And so you're not going to find Jamaican Creole on a curriculum. However, if you have a heritage language program, that's where you'd get the ability to kind of reinforce your home languages. So if you speak Greek or Italian or Arabic or Farsi, you have a group of students who likewise speak the same language, and you're trying to reinforce that home language in the student. What happens a lot, and many of us who are first generation might recognize this, is that sometimes you lose that connection to your family when you're in this new place. And so by having a heritage language program, you're always ensuring that you're always able to connect with your family. So you have an AIS family, but you also have your home family, and there's always the communication, strengthening both communications.
Yeah, I think if we had more time, I'd ask you to delve into how that all works, because I think it's fascinating. You're able to get the staff that you need to do that. I think it's mostly an after-school type program.
Yes, it's after school.
But yeah, I mean, so many different languages in addition to the ones that you teach in an immersive kind of basis. So, tell us about your job. Why does your job exist at a K through or 3K through 12th educational institution?
Yeah, so I'm actually coming out of industry. So I've worked in innovation spaces in industry for a long time. And AIS is special in that they allow me to do a lot of this innovative, work in a school. And we're all aware of what's going on with technology. Last couple months has been AI with ChatGPT or the VR immersive tech. And all of these things are impacting not only the workforce, but also how we educate children. And so part of my job is to kind of leverage industry knowledge and put it into a 3K-12 context. And also another part of my job is preparing, making sure that our students are prepared when they enter university and then further enter the workforce, because they're going to need to have these skills. We talk a lot about people being digital natives, and from a tech perspective, there's no such thing as a digital native. Everybody has to learn how to interact with technology. So if we're sitting and thinking that the kids are going to get this by osmosis and somehow understand, machine language, and that's not going to happen. So it really takes some really thoughtful planning and how we integrate it into even as low as the preschool, how they're interacting with robotics, how they're interacting with computers in a productive way, so that then when they do get to college, they're prepared. When they do get into the workforce, they're prepared.
I know it's not specifically your job, in terms of like enrollment and all that stuff, but what do you hear from people that maybe they wish they would have known about, just the economic or the educational ecosystem in Atlanta? Like, how would you advise people to prepare if you're moving your family here? How do you even make sense of looking around, right? There's just so many different options. There's public versus private. There's different districts. There's places that have innovation people and not. So, like, how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think the one good thing about Atlanta is we do have a nice education system. I think one of the privileges that we have is the privilege of choice and being able to find something that really fits your family. So I think that's really good about Atlanta. Unfortunately, some places are more well-resourced than others as far as the kind of the public-private argument. And also some places have more advantages for students who want to explore other avenues of themselves. So I think it's really going to be up to families to really dive deeply, not just looking at the websites, and every website has cute kids smiling and whatever, but really looking at what the schools are developing, where the students are going with their lives, how, if you have a global perspective, is your school, showcasing that global perspective, how diversity is a huge component of our institution. We have about 90 nationalities or 60 languages. It's hugely diverse. And if we're preparing kids for being global citizens, I think it's important that should reflect itself in the population of the school.
How are y'all thinking about digital or virtual education in the post-pandemic world? Right. I mean, obviously a lot of kids were forced into it. I think there were some good parts about it, but there are obviously some bad parts about it, isolation, et cetera. You've just launched this new, this is fresh on my mind, so y'all just launched this new partnership with Atlanta United that kind of blends a lot of those elements. So I wonder if you talk about how y'all are thinking about this.
Yeah, so from a tech perspective, I know the pandemic was really bad, but from a tech perspective, it was really excellent because it really allowed people to start really thinking outside the box and actually putting their money where their mouth is. So before the pandemic, there was a lot of, we might do this, we might not do this. So the pandemic forced us to do many things, and we were able to kind of leapfrog and really advance very quickly. So what we have been working on is getting at certain things that came out of the pandemic, such as students feeling isolated, and working on the social emotional aspect of learning. Many kids are suffering from mental issues right now. So one of the things that came out of the kind of thinking and working on our kind of virtual hybrid offering is this program with Atlanta United, which is going to be a kind of a three-fer. So you have in-person, you have hybrid, and you also have asynchronous, meaning the students are doing some self-study by themselves. And it's a really exciting program for us because it helps us to start showcasing our expertise and our knowledge in the area. And we had the, really, fortunate that we had a really fantastic pandemic program. So our school didn't miss a beat. And we really want to kind of capitalize on the learnings that we had during that time. And we're really happy that Atlanta United saw the value in our program and we're going to start this adventure together.
Yeah, and this is for high school age students who are,
Yes.
part of the academy, the Atlanta
Yeah.
United Academy, and have a crazy schedule because they're training in the morning.
Yeah, so
and-
they're like semi-professional students or
Yeah.
professional students, so
Yeah.
their focus in life is being a soccer star, the next Messi or whoever.
yeah.
So, but we all know that everybody isn't going to get to that
Right.
level, so it's really important that they build up not only their athletic prowess, but also their intellectual prowess. And many of these students want to go to top colleges, want to be in these programs, so our job is to work on them intellectually, and we'll leave the foot stuff to Atlanta United.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so thank you, Marsha. Appreciate that so much. We've got another expat story here, fresh from Europe. So we've had a lot of Latin American focus today, so we got to mix it up a little bit. And we've got, let's see, how do I say your last name? Delwaide. Okay. So we've got Antoine Delwaide from Sensolus here. Sensolus?
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Oh.
Or see you.
Got to turn it back on.
Is it working?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
There we
Good,
go.
good.
Perfect. So thanks, Antoine. Really appreciate it. I told him we held this event here just for he and Carlos, so they could go do their work and then come back down for 5 minutes and help us out. But really appreciate you doing this. Belgian-based company
Yes. Correct.
from Ghent,
Yeah, indeed.
which I visited right before the pandemic, so I was very excited. I got there before travel shut down.
Lucky you. It's a beautiful city.
It is very beautiful. Tell us about Sensolus, what you do, and how you kind of started looking at Atlanta.
Sure. So we are an IoT company. So we sell a kind of industrial version of the Apple AirTag. So it's a tracking solution connected to a cloud platform, and this is used mostly by logistics companies or industrial manufacturers that want to track often their non-powered assets, because our trackers last on a single battery for 5 to 10 years. So containers, trailers, crates, anything that's high value, non-powered, and needs to be tracked. Yeah. And so
We started with chicken backpacks.
Yeah, indeed, that's correct. Yeah. So, indeed, we've been we've been around for a long time, almost 10 years, and it took quite some time to find our path and exactly what Sensolus was going to become. But the first few years were a lot of always related to tracking, but a lot of different projects. We did some tracking of chickens for a while. Then we tried a project tracking some pigs. That was even harder. So they moved away from that. They went into healthcare, tracking elderly people, but it was also very, very complex. And actually, it all related back to infrastructure. They needed always all kinds of infrastructure deployed all around buildings or outdoor fields, but to be able to track accurately the animals or the people or any asset they wanted to track. And so they realized that they hated the infrastructure, and they said, okay, we're going to move on to another solution, much easier, which works a bit like the Apple AirTag, basically, where you just install it on the assets, it's activated, it's connected to a cloud platform, it works indoor and outdoor, anywhere, 5 to 10 years, and it's just much, much easier. Not as accurate, not as live, but much easier to scale, basically. So, and that was in 2016. And it started actually because there was a request for proposal from a large manufacturer in Europe, Airbus, who wanted to track all of their packaging, containers, crates, and so on. They had tens of thousands of those. Wow. And Sensolus had never done a project in that, but they were competing against big telecom company providing solutions. And the only difference they had is that they had the solution working basically already, whereas the big telecom companies were going to develop it, and Airbus was on the cloud, so we want it like that, and started really focusing on that segment only for the past 7 years now. Yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty big first big client.
Yeah, that's a good reference to that, and to scale after that.
Yeah, so should we thank Princess Astrid for you being here today?
It definitely helped, yeah, indeed. So
let me contextualize that question.
Yeah.
So, Belgium hosted Atlanta hosted what was billed as the biggest foreign trade delegation to come to the city since the Olympics, when Princess Astrid brought 300 to 500, whoever you talk to has a different number, Belgian companies here last year. I think it was.
Indeed, correct. So my CEO was part of the delegation, and during this trip, we actually signed a contract with a big partner here in Atlanta. The partner is Tosca, and we track pallets basically for them. And that really helped us indeed consider Atlanta as a destination. Also simply the fact that when the CEO was there, he came twice for this contract, he actually really loved the city. And during the same trip, because at first we were considering New York, but during the same trip, he went both to New York and Atlanta and realized how much he preferred Atlanta to New York just to establish an office. Yeah. Then there's the advantage of the connectivity with the airport, the cost of doing business, which is much lower. So,
well, you are right in the middle of everything we're talking about today, right? Like you're here representing, doing business development for North America for the company. What's been your experience getting settled here, and are you settled here yet?
Probably not fully settled yet, no, but it's been quite good considering it's quite a complex. I moved myself from Belgium to Atlanta, but actually most of the focus and the work was on starting the activities. So professionally, there are certainly a ton of resources to help us get set up. I think one of my first meetings was with the Chamber of Commerce, but you can go to, the state also has people to help you there. I mean, everywhere you go, if you ask for help, you get some help. So that's definitely, you can find all the help you need to get settled from a professional point of view. Personally, it's sometimes a bit harder to manage because you arrive there. First, you have no entity, so you're still on the traveling visa, so you don't have a social security number, so you cannot rent an apartment. Forget about having a loan for a car or anything. All of that is complex to manage. Even Wi-Fi and the phone subscription, I could not have without the social security number at first. So it was you just need to prepay everything and all of that. But it takes just a lot more time. I remember being for 3.5 hours at Bank of America to open a bank account because, again, no social security number. So it's always the same thing. But in the end, you do it on the side when you have time and you focus more on the business. It's good to find that you have a lot of people here willing to make introductions for you to get you settled in faster.
What does being settled look like for you? I mean, are you planning, like we were talking about, Michael was talking about your expectation of like, are you going to be here a year? Or are you going to be here 5 years? Do you know that yet? Or are you still just seeing how the business runs?
Yeah, I don't know exactly for how long I'm going to be here, but at least for still 1.5 years, I would say. So probably longer. But the intention of Sensolus is to establish an American team, not to send Belgians over here to run the business. It doesn't make sense for us. So my job is actually to find also the right people to run the activities for us here in the US. Once this is done, probably I don't need to stay anymore. I will probably want to stay a bit longer because I really enjoy the city, but it's...
Well, you have a bunch of people out here that will say, you know, I came for 3 years and it's 30, you know.
I know.
So Atlanta has that effect on people. But thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Now you can go back to work. Now he's going to go do the real work. So next on the list, we've got Cheryl Leydon from Aprio, who's going to tell us about international tax considerations. So get your notebook out.
Hi, so I'm Cheryl. I work for Aprio. I've been with Aprio about 7 years, working in expatriate tax for over 30 years. We specialize in individuals with cross-border tax issues. We have everything from employers that have a large global workforce with established policies to entrepreneurs that have come to the U.S. and expanded their business here and work with them on getting their entities set up and established and their families, social security numbers and tax IDs and all that stuff that gets a little bit more complicated along the way. There's been a massive evolution in, I guess, expat tax since I've started my career. First, we started off with many companies had full-blown expatriate policies. That was pretty much the standard, full rich packages where the benefits and the tax reimbursements would pretty much double the salary. And then we saw an evolution over the next period to go from those full-blown packages would be only for strategic expats for their companies. And now they support employees, help them move over, give them some tax support for a year or two, and then they settle and they become local employees, and they're on their own after that. So more permanent transfers as opposed to full-blown expat packages. Now, those expat packages still happen. We still have many clients that do those, but they just become less and less. And then COVID hit, and I mean, the world changed immediately, right? We all know that. So we had a lot of these expat transfers just stopped cold, right? Immigration came to a standstill. Nobody could get visas. But the way we work changed too, because everybody was working remotely. And so now we've seen companies have very different issues. They still have the expat packages, they still have the permanent transfers, but now we see individuals that have, personal reasons why they want to work, and they feel like they can work from anywhere in the world. And it just gets a little bit more complicated from a tax perspective and from a corporate reporting perspective for both the individuals and for the companies in these issues. You can go to the next slide. And what makes that complicated from a U.S. perspective is, there's really two things from a U.S. perspective in tax that make issues more complicated. First, U.S. citizens are going to be subject to U.S. tax no matter where they live in the world. As long as they meet the income reporting thresholds, they have a tax return filing requirement. And a lot of people don't realize that, but tax return, information reporting, bank and asset reporting. So that's the first issue. The second issue that we see is foreign nationals coming into the U.S. Aside from some treaty exemptions, if you're in the U.S. as an employee of a company, or whether it's U.S. or foreign, and you're in the U.S. for more than 90 days or earn more than $3,000, you may have a U.S. tax compliance requirement. And so it makes it very difficult for individuals to be compliant. And now that's a very low threshold, and I guess what we see is, in some instances, companies have their own policies with regards to short-term travel and how employees report. And so because of these two things, the U.S. citizens living abroad always having to file, and expats our foreign nationals having such a low threshold, we see that from a U.S. perspective, there's a lot of compliance headaches. And Carlos and Antoine, I feel for you, right? All the paperwork and the social security numbers, and it's a nightmare, and it's a lot. So we've had recently, I guess the main issues that we've seen are that come to us that look different is that, like last week I had a client call me and say, all right, we have an employee who's on a TN visa, and he wants to go spend some time with his family in Mexico, and he wants to work 50-50. And I said, okay, well, he's going to have U.S. reporting requirements. He's going to have Mexico reporting requirements. The company might actually have a PE in Mexico because he was a fairly high-level executive and doing sales and that sort of thing. So in the end, the company's like, we're not going to do it. We just can't. The reporting threshold is just a nightmare for a scenario like that. And then we had another company come with us and say, oh, well, we have this perfect candidate. He lives in Canada. And how can that work? So we kind of worked with them, and I think they actually made it work. So they hired this employee in Canada. They put him on a PEO, which helped for the local reporting. So the company didn't have to set up an entity in Canada. His duties were not such that it attracted a permanent establishment or tax exposure in Canada for the U.S. company. So in that situation, we worked with the clients, and it worked out. It was fine. And then we've had other scenarios where, we have individuals that want to go visit family in India. My job, if I can work from Atlanta, I can work from India, right? And visit my family and spend a year there or two. My parents are getting older, right? So And then the client asks us, so we just want to make him a contractor. I said, well, it's not that easy, right? There are rules, local US rules, India rules, that define what a contractor is versus an employee. So you can't just say, well, I can't make him an employee, so I'm going to make him a contractor, because there's a definition of employee versus contractor. So we had to work with them and change it up a little bit. And they made that scenario work. So we've seen a lot, of changes recently. And all these expat issues, what we see is companies that have really defined programs will have, they know they're sending employees from this location to that location. They've done it 1,000 times. Easy, right? They know exactly who to go to within the organization, and there's policies. But what we see is, the amount of time it takes to send, 100 people on an established policy, you might spend that same amount of time sending 5 people to a new jurisdiction or setting up a new entity and hiring new people locally. So we have, because it touches all aspects of the organization. You have HR, payroll, finance and legal, tax. It's really like a broad network. So, at Aprio, we have a group. We're a US-based company, but we have affiliates around the world. So we work with our clients to assist them with reporting, not only for US, but, in the local jurisdiction where they're coming from or going to. So we have a lot of connections there. We also work a lot with transfer pricing and M&A within Aprio. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Aprio, 35 languages natively spoken. That's pretty cool. And I love that setup, particularly for a Christian who's going to come up soon. Because we always talk about the world, the world being flat. There's all this opportunity to do things globally, internationally, but there's still a lot of hills and valleys in the flatness, right? Like there's still a lot of things, nuts and bolts that we have to work out, and rules that apply differently depending on where you are jurisdictionally, et cetera. So I'm glad we have people like Cheryl to help us work through that. So I'm going to bring up our final speaker for the day, last but certainly not least, particularly on the issue that he's going to talk about, which is cross-cultural adaptation, integration, Christian Höeferle. Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. The culture map? We will. Just feel free to roll it through. I'm not going to follow a script anyway. By show of hands, how many of you in this room are here as an expatriate right now? Oh, wow. Thank you. And how many of you have been an expatriate sometime in your life? Fantastic. That's more than half of the room. So my audience is here. Fantastic. So who am I? I thought I was an expatriate for a while. And now I've been in this country for 20 plus years, so I guess that doesn't count anymore. I'm also not an immigrant, but I don't know what I am. It doesn't really matter. I've come here, liked it here, and decided to stay. And in doing so, I realized other people go through a similar experience, and they do so by jumping through hoops of finding a social security number, or applying for one, not finding one, finding somewhere to stay, adjusting to the linguistic differences, finding educational facilities for their children, maybe or hopefully not having to talk to the mainly law firm to talk about all these family issues on a legalistic perspective. So I made this my business. Our company is called The Culture Mastery because we help people master culture. Those of you, and I've seen many hands go up, who have worked outside this country or your birth country, how many of you can honestly say that it was super, super easy to fit into a foreign culture? Well, see, 2 half hands going up. I'll talk to you later. I want to find out how you did that. How many of you actually thought it took some time to getting used to new ways of living, new ways of working, being with one another, solving problems, communicating, giving feedback, organizing work, holding people accountable to agreements, making those agreements, make them robust and understandable for all parties involved? How many of you had challenges doing that? Okay, thank you. I see a lot more hands going up. So our clients are multinational organizations who come to us because they're either sending expatriates overseas or they're receiving expatriates here, or very often they have multicultural, multinational teams. So people work together who come from different parts of the world who may have similar subject matter expertise. They have the same core knowledge of the work that they do. However, they have very different approaches to getting that work done. And I could give you multiple examples, but I think the one that stands out most in the last 2 years of our work was here in Georgia, and that's very fitting to this environment. There is I'm not going to name the company because I think they're happy if I don't say who they are. It's a German automotive supplier here in Georgia, and they invested in a greenfield project, $80+ million investment, the single biggest investment that the company had ever done, whether domestically or internationally. They've been very successful in other parts of the world, and now they found themselves here in the United States for the first time at this scale. And they sent over some very experienced people to set up that plant and just get the manufacturing started, get all the permitting started, getting a building built, all the nuts and bolts, the hard stuff, the taxes, the real estate, the schools, the government incentives, the tax abatements, all the city council, county commission stuff that needs to take care to get a product from grassroots to watertight concrete and slab rooftop, right? And they brought these experts over, and they're really, really good at what they do in terms of their subject matter expertise. They, turns out, suck at working with people that are not like them. And this is the core of our work. We work with people who have a really hard time doing what they do outside of their native culture. My native culture, you might hear from the accent, is from Central Europe. I'm German by birth. And I sucked at this too, hard. My wife and I, we started a school in Southeast Tennessee, just outside of Chattanooga, in 2005, a Montessori school. A novel educational approach to some people in the Tennessee Valley, even though it's been around for 100+ years. Some of the parents even called it the monastery school. There were no nuns, but we clarified that quickly. And we had trouble keeping employees, educators, staff members. We grew from a 3-people team to a 20-people team in no time, but these 20 people wouldn't stick around, mainly because my wife and I have a very unique approach to giving feedback and motivating people, which, to those of you who understand German-speaking cultures, it's not just the Germans, it's the Swiss, German-Swiss, the Austrians, part of the East Belgium. Where's Antoine? He's already, oh, he's back there, all right. So we tend to talk very directly. I mean, Belgians know this, the Flemings and the Dutchies. I mean, you're Wallonian, right? Yeah, you struggle with that too, right? So, we tend to be very direct, straightforward. We don't mince words, and well, I think people think we're abrasive and abrupt. So that's why we lost talent. We lost really, really good people. And that's not the purpose of a business, is not to be a revolving door of talent. It's to keep people, build people, develop them, so you don't have to be there at some point. And we succeeded by addressing the culture. We succeeded because we saw our own faults. We saw that it wasn't them, it was us. So going from these small step experiences to an $85 million project in North Georgia, what do? You actually have to talk to 50-something-year-old experienced managers and tell them, hey, you're not good at something, and let me show you how you can be better at this. Because if you're trying to improve this, and if you're willing to work on this part, which is the human skills, the power skills part. Those of you who know me and follow me on LinkedIn, I had a post yesterday written by Seth Godin, marketing genius, who wrote a think piece about so-called soft skills. And when I say soft skills, I always put it in air quotes, because nothing about these so-called soft skills is soft. Because your hard skills won't properly work without the so-called soft skills. So we call them power skills. And so if we tell these subject matter experts in their field, so if you're willing to work on these power skills, would it be okay for you to then be more successful in why the company sent you here in the first place? Oh, yeah, why not, right? So we coach, we train, we mentor, we educate a multicultural professional workforce. Sometimes they're expats, sometimes they're not. And if your company is thinking about sending people overseas, if your company is touching people who are in a service role or in a provider role to the expatriate world, please remind them that what they might consider as a soft factor is going to bite them in the rear, not far down the road. They just don't see it yet. Michael, if you want to bring up that pie chart slide, if you could, please. This one right here. So this is a breakdown of what a expatriate assignment can cost an employer. This is an arbitrary number between $1 and $2 million for a 3-year assignment. It might have gone up a little bit since I put that slide together, but you see all these pieces of the pie that factor into an expatriate assignment. And then you see those minuscule 1% slices of that pie that pertain to destination services, which is I call it the corporate hand-holding of taking people to the bank, to the Social Security office, to finding a home, finding schools, the boots on the ground support. The language training, which sometimes is important if you're coming from or if you're going into a country where you don't speak the language, and then the cultural piece. So these are minuscule percentages of your expatriate investment. Your company's investing in that talent anyway. Are you willing to lose that investment because you forgot about the quote-unquote soft stuff? Up to you. Tissues are me. We call it ICE-Q, and there might be a slide for that as well. ICE-Q is a combination of what I consider, what our company considers, essential power skills. IQ is what you know about the thing you do. So your smarts in your world, in your profession. CQ is cultural intelligence, how you are able to adjust to other behaviors, how you are willing to learn about other cultures, apply your learning, put that into action into your day-to-day, or as, I forgot your name, Ms. Maxwell, right? What was your first name? Marsha. The way you explained it, how you do it, AIS, marvelous. You're the embodiment of that, right? You take cultural intelligence at a third grader or younger level and you build them up like this. Corporate America, the corporate world usually doesn't do that. So we come in to fix the problem that people had because they didn't go to AIS. And EQ finally is emotional intelligence. How am I able to be cognizant and aware of my own emotional state and how it is affected by the cultural change, the location change? How am I able to recognize the emotional changes within my team members who express their emotion probably completely differently than people from my own native culture? How do I read that body language? How do I adjust my communication accordingly? All of these soft skills that you will need in order to make your hard skills work. That's why we call it ICE-Q. It has nothing to do with a wrapper or the sweet or unsweet beverage that we have at the buffet. So that's what we do. I did not bring business cards, but you'll find me here and give me yours and we'll connect. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashley, stay up here. I'm going to ask Christian to stay up here. I know we're kind of at time, but any other speakers who are still here, we're going to want to get a picture of you anyway, so just come on up here. And I wanted to say, if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to ask any of the speakers. I think Charles Kuck already left, but I think everybody else might still be here. So y'all come on up. Any Q&A from the audience, y'all let us know if y'all need anything. Yes, we got one here. I'm going to send a microphone around. Yeah. There you go. Personal service here.
Thanks. This is so cool and great. And I'm an outsider, came to Atlanta, discovered how amazing it was during COVID, how incredible the community is. Because when you're an outsider, people to help you, support you, like you talked about, training on the local customs and culture. But I'm kind of curious, to know, because there's all these people who have moved in with the movies. You're seeing like Justin Timberlake here now, and The Rock, and all these people moving in. And John Hamm was just on a podcast this week. Said how he was talking about how Atlanta's he loves it. Everyone coming together, the most incredible restaurants. So how do we continue do you see from a real estate perspective, technology that we have to keep investing and building? Because if there aren't enough homes, then people can't afford to live here, so they'll look elsewhere. How do you see people working together, and where do we move over the next couple of years?
Paula to answer that, or? Oh, sorry. Just for general? Okay.
I can go first. Definitely from the real estate perspective, what I see is a lot of people coming together, corporations, investors, cities. A good example is what I was talking about with Jones Creek. I mean, the entire city is coming together and partnering with investors, developers, corporations like, for example, Boston Scientific, which is a company in the life science industry, partnering with Toro Development to redevelop the downtown of this city. And the development is bringing a mixed-use project where there will be residences, workspaces, entertainment, restaurants. So in fact, is what you're saying, is people coming together, businesses working together to improve areas of the city.
I think another thing too is if you want people to stay, you want them to be embedded in the community. So I think one thing that we do is we have internship programs with our students, and we go out into the community, different companies, and we try to embed our students in these places. And so that's kind of a reciprocal effect. If you have something that you've invested in, like a student or a place or community, then it's harder for you to leave. So I think building those kind of ties is also important.
Anybody else? Go ahead. Okay, yeah, Christian.
Just real quick, and thank you for that question, by the way. What Atlanta does differently than many other metropolitan areas in the United States that I've seen is it is diverse by design and by birth. This is what my black friends call Black Mecca. This is a positively African-American city that you don't have like this anywhere else in the U.S. You may have Chicago, you may have Baltimore, but nowhere in this country do you see black success without having to justify itself like you do here. So you have a community that is willing to engage with those who are different. And the expatriate community is growing, but also the immigrant community here has been very strong. There, of course, are Latino pockets, Caribbean pockets, African pockets, Asian pockets, but they do mix. And this is what Marsha said, you want to become part of these networks, and they are here, and they've helped us grow, and they've helped us grow deeper roots.
I like to add one more thing, and it's the support of the government. I mean, we are the #1 state in the nation to do business with, and different government entities are very impactful in, welcoming the different business and corporations coming from other states and other countries, and I think they are influential in making Atlanta a place that it has become.
I think Michael wanted to address one thing, and then I think we'll close it up.
Atlanta has always been very, very competitive. Back in the early 60s, we were talking about this earlier. Back in the early 60s, Atlanta and Birmingham, Alabama were about the same size. And they decided to go in very different directions on how they approached racial diversity. And we see who won that battle. So Atlanta's compared itself to the rest of the cities in the nation and took them head on and has done very, very well. And now Atlanta perceives itself as competing with the country, with the cities in the rest of the world. and I imagine we'll compete very, very well. And I think that the way in which we go forward is now a matter of enlightenment, for lack of a better term, and you nailed it with the ICE-Q thing, right? So our competitive advantage will be the ICE-Q that you're talking about, that we can showcase to the world. Anybody here a fan of Ted Lasso? That we can showcase to the world a kinder, gentler, more progressive-looking community who is designing how humans are going to move forward into through the 21st century, and that's how Atlanta's going to become so popular, so successful, and remain so.
This just got into an Atlanta promotional session here, so we got one more quick. Can you make it pretty quick, and then we'll wrap it up? It doesn't look like anybody's eyes are glazing over too much. So.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to say that me being a very new and fresh guy in the Atlanta business world, and coming from Ukraine about 1.5 years ago, staying about 6 months in New York and trying the real life in New York and moving to Atlanta, I would say that Atlanta is so welcoming and the people here are so great. And me working in the recruitment business and executive search business, I would say that it's really fun to talk to people and ask people to move into Atlanta, because you can say there are so many international movement, chambers, people, and they are so nice. So I would say Atlanta is one of the best places for me so far, and I enjoy it very much, and thank you all of us for being here and for having us like Ukrainians and hosting Ukrainians in the city. Thank you very much.
Another expat. Did you have one quick one? All right.
Hi, this question is mainly for Marsha and a little bit Christian maybe. You're raising cross-cultural kids, and I was hoping you could speak a little bit to what does that look like when you have a graduating class and these third culture kids, also known as cross-cultural kids, are now young adults. What are you seeing that is a different characteristic than a unilateral education system or cultural raised environment being raised?
Yeah. I think one thing that we see in our students is that they actually don't just matriculate to universities here. We have them matriculating to universities around the world, which is a positive. They have that choice. They don't have to worry about, if I want to go to France and I don't speak the language, they can do it, right? So that's really nice. They also have a more global perspective, so wherever they go, even if they do go to Georgia Tech down the street, they have this ability to land in a more mature fashion. I can't really describe it, but they're ready to take on more responsibility. They appear to be kind of more mature than their years, and they also have this confidence of entering spaces and owning the space, being very comfortable with interacting with people from whatever walk of life, whether that's socioeconomic or racial or international. So that's something that's very vastly different than you see in students who have a typical American education.
Christian, just the second part of that, as you deal with adults and expats, are you finding differences from if a leader has had cross-cultural training or was raised in a different country or bicultural parents, are you seeing differences there as well?
Very much so, yes. So if we have third culture adults as clients, then they are primed for this. They don't need to be asked to take on an expatriate assignment. They take the job because of the prospect of having an expatriate assignment. They want that to begin with. And we see that, we've seen that much more with millennials. We're seeing it with Gen Zs now. Gen Zs have a strong draw to that. If the employer does not offer that international exposure, then it might not be top of the list when it comes to choosing a job. So we see that a lot. And to really quickly give testimony, my kids didn't go to AIS, but I have 2 daughters who I guess are third culture kids. They were raised with 2 languages. What they did at age 7 independently, traveling or going globally, I didn't know at 27. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, obviously we could talk all day about all this. I think it leaves a lot to be discussed in future events. So hopefully y'all will come back and join us Maybe we'll do it sooner than next year. We're not quite sure yet. But I'd love for y'all to give a hand to our speakers. And if y'all will stay here just for 1 second, y'all are free to go. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be in touch with all the slides and everything. And also, please drop your name tags at the desk when you go out. Thank you.